Picture this for a second. You think you're making a smart, grown-up decision. You're in love. Things are going well. Moving in together feels natural, even responsible. It saves money. It feels like progress. But years later, you're sitting alone, staring at a legal letter that's about to erase a huge chunk of everything you worked for. And the scariest part?
My savings are
You
looking
never
great
thought you
this
agreed
month.
to any of this.
Time to get to
Let me
work.
tell you a story. There was a man I'll call Daniel,
I'm just
early
worried.
30s,
It's okay.
disciplined,
I'm here.
focused.
Thank you.
He had spent years building
Is something
stability,
wrong?
steady
I'm just
career,
worried.
savings,
It's okay.
a home he was proud
Thank
of.
you.
He wasn't reckless with money. He wasn't impulsive. When he met his partner, the connection felt real,
I
comfortable,
love these quiet moments
safe.
with you.
After a
Me
few
too. I
months,
feel so safe.
she was staying over most nights anyway. One evening, she said what sounded completely reasonable. "We're already living together. Why not just make it official and save the extra cost?" Daniel thought about it. The logic made sense. Fewer bills, more time together, a sign of commitment. So he agreed. A few years later,
I'm so
the
glad we're
relationship
here.
quietly
Me
ended.
too. It's
No
perfect.
cheating,
Just
no
being
big
with you.
fight,
Always.
just two people
Hi
drifting
there.
apart.
Welcome to my cozy
She
living
moved
room.
out.
Come on in
Daniel
and make
thought that
yourself
was
at
the end
home.
of it.
I hope you
It
like
wasn't. What followed shocked him. Claims over shared life gains, questions about property value, discussions about support. Daniel kept thinking the same thing over and over. We weren't married. But legally, that detail mattered far less than he ever imagined. And that's what we're talking about today. Why? Living with the wrong partner can become the most expensive mistake men make. Not because relationships are bad, not because love is a trap, but because many men cross a legal
Okay,
line
what's
without
next on the list?
realizing it
We need some
exists.
cereal.
This
Oh, look,
isn't about
good eye.
fear.
Let's get that
It's
one.
about
Perfect.
awareness.
Stuck?
When most men
Let's see.
think about
Yeah, I don't get
commitment,
this part.
they think
Try
emotionally,
this approach here.
trust,
Oh, I see now.
loyalty,
Thanks.
building a future
Oh,
together.
notification.
What they don't
What is
think
it?
about
A payment?
is how
No
the
way.
law
I need to check
interprets
this.
behavior. And here's the
Ugh, my
uncomfortable
schedule is
truth.
packed.
In many
Look at all
places,
these
commitment
meetings.
isn't
I need a
defined by a
vacation.
ring or a ceremony anymore.
This is so
It's defined
boring.
by
Yeah,
how you
nothing to get
live.
on.
The
Oh, wait,
law
this looks
doesn't ask
fun.
what you
Yeah.
intended. It looks at what
Here's
you
that
did.
report.
If
Oh,
you
thank
live
you. Just
together,
what I needed.
share a home,
This looks
blend
great.
Glad I
routines,
could help.
and function like a unit,
This is
the system
heavy.
may treat
I
you
know,
like
there's
a
bit
married
more.
couple,
Okay,
whether you
let's get
ever
the
plan to
wrench.
be one or
Good
not. No signature required. No warning label attached. This is where many men get blindsided. There's a massive information gap that almost nobody talks about. Women are often encouraged to think long-term
Okay,
about
time to face the
relationships,
day.
financial security, future stability,
Go.
legal rights. That information is everywhere. Friends talk about it. Articles exist. Professionals explain it openly. For men, the message is different. Men are taught to prove commitment through trust,
Hello?
to not
Someone there?
overthink,
This place
to
feels
not
so empty.
ruin the
No one's
moment
down here.
with practical concerns, to lead with the heart. So when the idea of moving in comes up, many men see it as a romantic or logistical step, something simple, something reversible. But legally, it often isn't. What usually happens isn't dramatic. It's gradual. First, she stays over more often. Then, she keeps them close. Then it's easier if she just moves in. Bills get shared. Groceries are bought together. Furniture decisions are made together. None of it feels dangerous. In fact, it feels like building a life. Time passes. Months turn into years.
Oh, I see now.
And without realizing
Home,
it,
money, and time.
you've created
I can
something the
handle
law
this.
recognizes as a partnership with financial
Feel so restless
consequences. And here's
If
the
you
part
will.
that stings.
The
When the
city.
relationship ends, the system doesn't see it as
That's not
someone
quite right.
moving out.
Ugh, why
It
isn't
often
this
sees it
working?
as a partnership dissolving. And dissolving partnerships involves division, negotiation, and sometimes long-term obligations.
For men,
This
what does that even
surprises
mean?
men
Is this
because
for
they
tools or
assume
ties?
fairness works
Ugh,
the
this
way
is
it
so
does in their
confusing.
head. I earned this. I owned this before. I never agreed to that. But courts don't operate on
I'll move
emotional
here.
memory.
Okay,
They
I
operate
move
on
here. I
patterns,
can jump you.
contributions,
My turn now.
and
Good
shared life
game.
structures. Another thing men underestimate is how circumstances change people. Early on, your partner may genuinely mean it when she says she doesn't care about money or assets. And she might
This is
truly
so
believe
relaxing.
that at that
It really
moment.
is. I
But
love our cozy
breakups
spot.
change
Me too. Cheers
perspectives.
to that.
Stress changes priorities. Advice from others reframes the past. The law doesn't enforce what someone said during love. It enforces what it considers reasonable after love is gone. That's why trust alone isn't protection. Feelings don't override systems. Good intentions don't cancel legal frameworks. Some men assume they're safe because they avoided marriage. They think they've learned from past mistakes. No wedding, no paperwork, no problem. But this is where the illusion is strongest. In many cases, avoiding marriage doesn't reduce risk if cohabitation still happens. The boundary that matters most isn't no wedding. It's how intertwined your lives become. Living together can trigger the same exposure men thought they were escaping. This is especially devastating for men who rebuild after loss. They're cautious. They're clear about boundaries. They believe they're making smarter choices. And then they're hit again harder because they didn't realize the rules had changed. So why don't men see this coming? Because nobody teaches relationship risk management to men. They're taught romance, not consequences. They're taught that protecting yourself signals fear, that love means vulnerability. But vulnerability without awareness isn't bravery, it's blindness. Now, let's talk about the trade-off. What do you actually gain by living together? Convenience, shared expenses, emotional closeness, comfort. These are real benefits, but they exist only while the relationship is healthy. What do you risk? Potential loss of assets, financial obligations that can last years, legal costs, a setback that can erase decades of effort, temporary comfort versus long-term exposure. That imbalance matters. This doesn't mean men should avoid relationships or live in isolation. It means choices should be made consciously, not casually. Separate residences don't mean lack of commitment. They mean clarity. They preserve independence while allowing connection by choice, not obligation. And yes, some partners won't accept that. But that resistance is information. Important information. It tells you what's truly being prioritized. If living together is unavoidable, minimizing financial blending matters. Clear boundaries, separate accounts, documentation, awareness. Nothing is foolproof, but informed decisions are always better than blind ones. Here's the truth. Most men learn too late. Love doesn't shield you from consequences. The law doesn't care how pure your intentions were. And once exposure is created, it can't be undone. You only get one financial life, one timeline, one chance to protect what you've built. So before you make a decision that feels romantic, ask whether it's also informed. Because the most expensive mistakes aren't made out of malice. They're made out of trust without understanding. Love deeply if you choose to. Commit honestly if you choose to. But never confuse emotion with immunity. Romance fades. Structures remain. Choose wisely.